So, hello guys. Very warm welcome. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to Level Ground, where we simply, sincerely, and frankly speak about the Word of God, share our faith, and speak our hearts. My name is Esther, and today I am here with a dream that I had. And this is a dream I had a couple of months ago. But what was unusual about this dream is that I received the interpretation in a certain way, which means how the Lord ministered the interpretation to me wasn't even usual for me, because I normally receive the interpretation in parts for most of the dreams that I have, which is just a main way the Lord speaks to me. But this one was different because I had the dream, and a couple of days later in quiet time, I just felt led to go and read through that dream again. And as I was reading, I received the whole interpretation in detail in one sitting. And as I was receiving the interpretation, I noticed that this was not a message for me, but for the church. And in this dream, I received an angle of his perspective of the dating scene within the church. It's a really interesting dream. It's not too complicated, but there are three main scenes that take place, but it's a very detailed dream. So just even explaining to you guys will take maybe, a minute, but pay attention to the details because they're actually very important for the things he's trying to say. So I'll explain to you the dream in one sitting and then go through the details again and interpret them as the Lord gave me understanding and sum it up with Bible verses to just share what I feel like was the heart of God behind this dream. So in this dream, I'm looking at my laptop here because I have some notes just to not forget certain details. But in this dream, I was in this house. It was a nice, beautiful, big house. Not huge, but, a fairly big house. Had a garden, a backyard, and, front yard and everything. Just a typical thing. And there were multiple women in this house, but I was aware of 5 of them. So me included in the group, we were 5 women. We were all 5 women, the same age, like my age. We were all mid-20s, young adult women. And they were all very nicely dressed. So I didn't see myself, but I felt like I was part of the group. So they were all distributed, all over in the house. Everyone was in a particular room. Like there was someone in the bathroom, someone in the kitchen, someone in the bedroom. And then I was in a particular room, which again was not shown to me because it wasn't about me. And then there was one of the young women was in the garden. So, and it was interesting because I was walking through the house and it's like I got a view. I got to get an overview of what was taking place in the house. And every woman was in their place. One was cooking, but for her to know what to cook, she had to ask the other women, hey, what did you like? What do you like? What can you eat? What can't you eat? And the other one was making the bed and she was asking about plans for the night and stuff like that. So it seemed like we lived all together in this house, but everyone had their task and their department of responsibility, right? And as I was walking through the house and watching them as they were coordinating with each other and communicating with each other, but also being independent, working on what was given to them to be responsible over, I just saw them with what attitude they were working, and and it was really cool because there was peace in the house, the communication was healthy, there was unity in the house, you could feel that. And as I was walking by, watching every single one of them work, they just had this little smile on their face, which seemed like they were content where they are. So I ended up outside in the garden talking to one of, the young women, the young ladies. And as I was talking to her, this huge van just pulled up. Screeching noise, very fast, speedily just pulled up. And then this guy got out of it, and it was he had this huge microphone in his hand, holding this ridiculously huge microphone in his hand, and then he started talking. And he started talking so loudly, it felt like he was holding a megaphone, really. That's what it sounded, that's what his voice sounded like. It was really just this megaphone type of voice just for him to be loud. That was the only thing, that was the only intent of him holding that microphone. So that was the only purpose of him holding that microphone, for him to be loud. So he was loud and he started talking, and he sounded like he was, hosting a game show or dating or show or something. So hosting some kind of a show. And he was talking and we were I was a bit confused, and I was like, who called this man? Nobody ordered him. What the heck? What is he doing here? And I looked at my friend who was in the garden, and she was just as confused as I was. And the other women in the house started coming out, and they looked at each other and we were like, who is this guy? So we were all a bit irritated, but kind of waiting to see what would happen. So this guy came out of the van, he started speaking. I did not hear the words. I think it was not really, the words weren't important at the time. It was just about him being loud, him continuously speaking. He took no breather. He was continuously speaking, saying things that were just, it seems like he just needed to release words. Words had to be released without any break. And then there was this big poster that was put up in front of the van as well, with his 3 men on it. And those 3 men on the poster were the 3 men that were in the van, and they got out of the van. And just as they were portrayed on the poster, that is how they stood in front of the poster for us. And then I started hearing what he actually said. So he started promoting. He's like, oh, these are the 3 men we have on sale right now, as if they were products. And you guys need to engage, and these are the ones that are mostly wanted, and blah, 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 and you need to get to them, and da-da-da-da. It was really just sales-like hosting type of vibe and, type of communication. And it was just weird. It was just odd. We were all confused. But the more he started speaking, the more we started getting convinced that we had to take part in it. And the more we also started I just felt this like seed of anxiety drop into me, and I just felt like pressured into taking part. And I started moving towards the van. I started moving towards the men to kind of, we were looking at each other and we were insecure about what to do, but we were also moving towards the guys to kind of engage and do what the heck this guy was telling us to do. So he was like, oh, you need to engage, you need to date these guys, and these are the ones you want to be with, and blah, 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 blah. So scene switched, and all of a sudden I was on this bus with one of the guys. So there were 3 guys. One guy had dark hair. The other guy was just really a little more bulky than the others and had like a really short haircut, just for you guys to be able to distinguish the 3 guys. And the third one had blonde, long hair. And he had a more athletic type of figure. So I was on the bus all of a sudden with this guy who had darker hair. And just to describe these 3 guys, they all had like a model type of appearance. They all definitely fit the beauty standards of the world. They were muscular and they looked like they went to the gym every single day. Like, high cheekbones, their jawline was out, their hair was sleeked down, everything was sleek, everything was perfect. It was almost too perfect. So they looked really well. They looked well put together. And I was on this bus with this dark-haired guy. And we were talking, and it seemed like we looked at each other and we kind of caught interest or thought, oh, you could potentially be a person. So we were on the bus and we were getting to know each other, but it was all just still very, nothing serious, just getting to know each other. And we were talking, and he is like really kind and very sweet and very nice. And one of the girls in the house she was standing not too far from me, not too far from us. And she was working and doing something. So as we were talking, she was talking as well. I don't know to who, but she was talking. And then she said something. And as she said that, he stopped talking. He was in shock. And I just saw this little picture of his heart breaking open. And I felt like whatever she said had pierced his heart or had revealed something that had been in his heart, something that only he and the Lord knew. And she spoke it out. So as she spoke it out, his attention, like he was shocked for a second. And he kept quiet, and then he looked towards her, and there was this instant bond. There was this instant pull and this instant connection. And after I saw the heart like crack open like an egg, and I saw them connect, I knew, oh, they belonged actually together. So for me, it was like, oh, I need to back out. And immediately I made that decision in my head. I switched back to the house. And I was back at the house, and the 2 guys were still standing there. And the women were kind of standing there where they were talking to each other. But it was more in a, argumentative type of way. They were arguing with each other of who to date, who next, or something like that. And so I came back, and the host noticed that I was back. That didn't work out. And he was like, oh, there are these 2 guys that you can still date. Try it with one of them. He was trying to convince me to, get involved with one of the other guys. And I looked at them and I saw the second guy. And the second guy never saw his face, because on the poster and even in real life, he was standing there with his back turned to me and his back turned to all of us, like all the other girls as well. I never saw his face. I just found that very interesting. And as I was looking at him, I just received this information, this detail that it's like I heard him thinking, saying, I'm only going to reveal to you who I am after you have committed to me. It kind of gave me the vibe of, I am the prize. And until you have actually consciously made the decision to commit to me, you don't deserve to kind of see who I am. That was his words. But this wave of deception kind of came with it. So I just felt that was really arrogant. So I was like, oh no, I'm not dating that guy. And then I looked towards the other guy, the blonde-haired guy. And I looked at him, we looked at each other, and I was like, oh, I don't feel initial attraction. And he looked at me and I felt the same, but he looked at me in a bit of a condescending way even. It was really, I don't know. He just looked at me in a condescending way, kind of ached, I don't know. And it was, I don't know, it was just weird. It was just weird. And I was like a bit put off by that. But then I saw how one of the girls walked up to him and he looked at her and he smiled and he kind of accepted her and they got together. What I found really interesting about them getting together is that the girl that came up to him was the female version of him in appearance. Like they both had this exact same color of blonde hair. They had the same type of figure. They had the same facial structures and, details in face. Like they looked exactly the same. He was just male and she was the female version of him. So I was like, that also came with like an oddness in in the situation. So anyways, that was that. And I was like, well, that's it, That's it. That's all that's there, basically. So the guy looked at me and I was like, it's not going to work out for me with these two guys. And then he looked at me and he was like, oh. And all of a sudden he deflated. Like before he was constantly talking and promoting and convincing and pressuring. And all of a sudden he went quiet and he was like, oh, and was kind of pissed off. And he said, okay, well then. And he said in a lower tone, he was like, well then take one of the, the leftovers in the back, kind of. And I was like, what? There are more men, really? And he was like, yeah, in the back, go there, do whatever you like, but I'm not interested in it anymore. So as I was walking to the back to see, because it was kind of, he said, behind the huge truck and behind the huge poster, basically, they are standing there. So as I was walking behind there, I had the sense that they were really a huge group of men, like 25, 30, 35 men that were standing there. And as I was walking there, I switched into the last scene of the dream. And in this scene, I was walking forward and I was walking behind this guy. And it was really interesting because the guy, just to describe his appearance, first of all, I was not the only one walking behind him. It was me and one of the other girls that did not end up with one of the three guys because we were 5 females and 3 male that were being presented. So 3 ended up with them, 2 were left, me and this other girl. And we were walking behind this guy. And this guy, he looked like a lumberjack. He had this stereotypical shirt that, that lumberjacks wore and maybe do still wear. Not to stereotype them. But yeah, and he had this woodcutter on his shoulder. And he was really tall. I did not see what it looked like in the front. I did not see what he looked like. I didn't see his face or anything, but I didn't have a sense that was bad because it was still clear to me who it was. And as I was walking behind him, I was receiving information about him, about his character and, who he was at heart. So I was walking behind him. He had the woodcutter, the shirt. He had broad shoulders, was very muscular, looked like a masculine guy. And, looked a bit rougher around the edges, but was also very well put together. Just, at first sight, at first glance, he wouldn't look like those polished model type of guys that we had seen before previously in the dream. So yeah, I just looked around and we were walking towards this house, this brick house that was near a forest more, in a suburban area and in nature or near nature. And as I was looking at the house, I received information. I just heard a voice say he built this house with his own 2 hands. And I looked towards the fireplace and I looked towards the place where he would cut wood. And I just saw him and I looked at him and I just heard he cares. And I heard he's a hard worker. What did I hear? I heard he's a provider. Exactly. And then I got this strong sense of peace in my belly. Like it spread in my belly like just warm honey, and I just got this strong sense of peace, and then I heard I'm home, and I woke up. So yeah, this is a long dream because of the details, but this is what happened in the dream, and now I want to give you kind of an interpretation of what the dream means. But you probably already have a gist, just to give you kind of the in detail interpretation. So the dream started off with us 5 women, young adult women, being in the house. And I believe that we, the group of women in the house, are symbolic to 2 things. One, we are symbolic to the church. The church in the Bible is presented female as the bride of Christ. So I think we are symbolic to the church. And I also believe we are symbolic to the women within the church. So specifically the females in the church. And we were all together. And as you heard me say, we were in the dream and everyone had their task in their room, but we were all still communicating and, working with each other. So there was a unity in the house. There was a peace in the house. And what he was telling me basically is that these women symbolize the women in the church that are single, because the single women were in a house together. So they were paying attention to each other. They were in fellowship with each other, but they were also content, which is why I saw them smile while they were doing their work. They were beautiful women, content in their work, content in their singleness, but living in fellowship and unity and peace with each other. And then this host turned up, and the voice of the host, it's not symbolic to, the enemy or a demon, but I was pretty sure that you could say that this voice is symbolic to the voice of carnal Christian church culture. I believe it's a carnal mindset or a carnal voice that was speaking in that dream. So that was the host's dream, and that was the host's voice. So he came for division. Because it was really interesting, the Lord was showing me, he said, pay attention to what happened after he started speaking. Like, what were the consequences? What was happening afterwards, after he had spoken and continued speaking? Like, pay attention to even how he spoke, that he was really loud, that he spoke without even, without a breather, without giving us time to think and perceive and see what does this actually mean, to evaluate the situation. He didn't even give us time for that. He just continuously speaking, and there was this kind of pressure that he applied to the group and this constant influencing of that voice. And that eventually planted this seed that allowed us to believe that we had to take part in this, right? The Lord also allowed me to pay attention. He said, pay attention even to the amounts of people. He's pushing into your face is only 3 men while you are 5 women. And I felt like the Lord was saying, there was a time in which, the women in the church were content in their singleness. They were content in their work. They were content with where they are. And then carnal church culture somehow infiltrated that unity and tried to bring division in that, because that is what it will cause eventually, whether that was their intent or not. But that voice came into church and started, causing disunity and division. And this competitive mindset, because he said there was a reason why only 3 men were presented for the 5 women, because it was to encourage this competitive mindset and this comparison and envy and, to just bring division, as I said, into their unity and peace, but also to exclude the other women who then weren't taking part in that church culture, in that dating culture, sorry. What I found also really interesting is that the host seemed like a host of a game show or of a dating show, right? And even that, when I sat down with the Lord, I felt like that wasn't coincidence. I felt that the Lord was giving me understanding to say that, the carnal world does not view dating as seriously as I do. Like, even dating I take serious. Not that it has to be all stiff and, unnatural, or it's all holy and spiritual. I'm not trying to over spiritualize dating, but I'm trying to say that the carnal world is taking it less serious and therefore applying rules to it that shouldn't be applied to how dating should take place within the church, in a way that everyone is considered and protected and valued and respected, right? So even that was dishonoring to even the process of dating itself. And that is what he was showing me, that the carnal world was dishonoring what dating should look like in the church. So we see these 3 guys, right? And these 3 guys, he showed me 3 types of guys within the church. These are not all guys, but these are 3 types of guys that he wanted to highlight to me. The first guy with the dark hair, I told you he was a handsome guy as well, had dark hair, he was all put in place. But this was the type of guy that was really kind. I think that's why I initially felt drawn to him. And we were, in the first team, we were on the bus, right? And the bus is symbolic to ministry in that dream. So we were both in ministry. He was definitely within ministry. So he is symbolic to the guy. He is symbolic to the type of guy that that happens to fit the standards of that happens to fit the beauty standards of the world. He happens to fall into the beauty standards and the appearance and the expectations and all the things that the world deems as beautiful and important and valuable and everything. He happens to fall into that, but he also still has a good heart. Like these three men, as I said, symbolize three types of men that are valued and pushed into the forefront by the world because they fit the beauty standards of the world and what a man should look like, what masculinity looks like. That is how they are being presented. So the first type of guy falls into that category, but he actually has a good heart. So his heart is with God. He is in ministry. He's faithful with where he is. And in that first scene in the bus, his heart cracked open like an egg. And after what this woman beside me had said, which I felt like the Lord was trying to tell me, even though that type of guy falls into the beauty standards of the world, I see that he walks with me and that he is faithful and that his heart is in the right place. And therefore I honor his heart's desires. And even in the place where I have placed him, I will lead him to the woman who is for him. I still see his heart and I pay attention to his heart and I answer the desires of his heart. Then the second type of guy is the guy, as I already mentioned, he's the deceptive kind of guy. Why? Because he was hiding. And there are two different ways of hiding in the Bible. There is the hiddenness that is according to God's will. For example, when something is hidden, but then will be revealed in time. So it's hidden for a reason. Right now, you are in the dark about that knowledge right now as it is, but as you continue in time, things will be revealed. That was the case with Daniel when he prayed and fasted because he noticed that now was the time for him to receive information that would help the Israelites step out of Babylonian exile. So he fasted and prayed and he asked the Lord, he said, Lord, you know what is hidden and what is in the dark, but you are light, therefore you can reveal it to me because now I know is the time. So he received that information. It's the same good type of hiddenness with Esther, that occurred with Esther because she was hidden for a very long time. Her name means hidden. Her royalty was hidden. She was always a queen, but her royalty was not to be revealed until Vashti was taken out of her position, and naturally the king desired a new queen. And that is when he started using favor to kind of put Esther in the position and reveal her as a queen to others as well. But there is also the type of hiddenness in which there is deception, right? So you hide something to deceive someone. Obviously, you give false testimony, you lie to make them think and see something not as it actually is. So that is the kind of deception I felt with the second guy. Which was really interesting. He was very manipulative because I felt like he wanted you to lock in with him and get attached. Somewhat be emotionally attached and committed already before he actually showed you who he was, basically when it was too late, not in the discerning phase, right? He didn't want you to even discern who he was until you were locked in. So it was definitely deceptive and manipulative. That was the second guy that was shown me. And the third guy that was shown to me, that kind of was condescending towards me. I felt like, it took me a second to understand what the Lord was saying, but I felt like the Lord was saying, he did not value you because he wasn't attracted to you. So because he wasn't attracted to you, he treated you worse or like you were less valuable, basically. And that's why you saw him pair up with a woman who looked like him. And it was not necessarily even about that detail, but I felt the Lord was trying to make me aware of the roots of that detail. And it all boils down to the fact that he did not love the way Christ does. Like that guy, it was shown to me that guy doesn't love the way Christ loves. Like the fruits of the Spirit are not being manifested through him. The love of Christ is not rooted within him. That is what it boils down to. And it was really interesting. Going back to the beginning scene, as I said, the consequences were, division and peace and everything, but also the women chasing the men. And the verse that came to me, one of the verses that came to me was, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Like it just flipped the whole thing. All of a sudden, the women were going for the men and not the other way around. It says in Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and he shall cling unto his wife. So that is a very intentional action from the man's side, like it's this pursuit from the man's side, and they shall become one flesh. So obviously they are both in agreement, but the pursuit comes from the man's, and that was not happening. So it just flipped everything, and that was really just clear that this was not the Lord's will and not the Lord's hand in this whole process. So eventually, I ended up in the third scene. And the lumberjack guy that was walking ahead of me was symbolic to the guys that were actually being hidden by the loudness and by the volume of, the carnal voice, and by the presentation and everything that was big, and, everything that just could hide the people that were standing in dark is what he presented to us. So the lumberjack was symbolic to those people that were standing in the back. That's why me and the other girl, who did not end up with the other three guys, were walking behind him. As I said, as I was walking behind this guy, I was receiving information about him. He also, I only saw his backside because I was walking behind him. He never turned around. I never saw his face. He never smiled at me or anything. But I still felt like I knew him. I still felt like I had the chance and the opportunity to even get to know him and see him and see through him. He was not hiding anything. That's what I'm trying to say. And what was clear about him is that he definitely did not fit the secular standard. As I said, he was kind of rough around the edges, not all well dressed up and everything, but he was decent. And if you looked a bit closely, he was definitely put together. He was decent. He was very masculine, which was really interesting about his masculinity. His masculinity was tangible compared with the other men. His masculinity, like, he was fit, but he was not fit because he went to the gym to look that way. I mean, you don't only go to the gym to look that way, but to also be healthy. But with the other model types of guy, I felt like they went to the gym to look masculine. And this guy was actually masculine. Like, the masculinity was the byproduct of the work that he was doing, of his character, right? And his character and the masculinity was somehow rooted within him and came from the inside out, not with the others, like from the outside in. So that was really interesting about him. What I also received as I was walking, I just felt and got the strong sense that he was a really humble guy, that he was a true caregiver, a true lover, like really loving, and a very trustworthy guy. Then the word of provider came to me. And even him walking before me was definitely symbolic to him being a leader. So God was saying, the type of guy that is standing in the dark, the type of guy that is being forgotten because you are blinded, and you are the women of the church, and all of them, of course, but the ones he's addressing, we are blinded and by the carnal voice, by the voice of carnal church culture. So him even walking before us was saying, hey, he has leadership qualities and he is going to be a good leader. And then what else? Oh yeah, what also stuck out to me is I was walking behind him. I was looking into the surrounding and I was looking at him, and there were 2-3 things that stuck out to me personally, which was, I think, really important, that I engaged in the dream for me to be able to interpret certain details like this. So there were 2-3 things that stuck out to me that afterwards, when I was writing them down, I noticed that these were 2-3 things that were important for me personally in a spouse. Things that I had expressed to God that were important for me to have in my spouse when I meet him. And those things were in him. I kind of was receiving the sense that he had that, and I saw the proof in the surrounding. And the Lord was telling me, this type of guy that is being hidden, this type of guy that is not being seen by the women in the church, but that is being forgotten, this type of guy is literally the answer to your prayers. He is the one you are praying for. Like, he is the answer to your specific individual prayers. And then at the end of the dream, as I said, I had this strong sense of peace and just coming home. I want to back this up with scriptures. To just sum it up, I think you guys get the gist of it. 1 Corinthians 1:10 speaks about division and the church being of one mind in Christ. This clearly says, as I said, this proves that division is really not from God. So this unity that manifested in the beginning in the house was definitely not from God. And also Galatians 5 speaks about the fruits of the Spirit and the fruits of the flesh. So comparison, envy, strife, these are clearly fruits of the flesh. And those were the fruits that were manifesting and taking place after that voice had entered, had found its room and its place in the church and amongst the women in the dream, which was sad. another thing that the Lord, I felt like, highlighted to me and spoke to me about, it was like, I think it's clear. I think if you're on YouTube and you're in the Christian space on YouTube, you will see that a lot of women, and a lot of prophetic words concerning marriage, a lot of prophetic words for women and men. By the way, this goes both ways, but I really believe that, the men and the women in this context, the way they were presented in my dream, are being addressed in exactly this way for a reason. So I felt like the Lord was just telling me, how you have noticed how women are longing for their spouses and women are calling out for their spouses, and there are lots of prophetic words for kingdom marriages and stuff like that. And there's this like cry from the women towards God for the men to step up or to step out, and that they are not the men that they wish to encounter, they are not encountering. And I just felt the Lord was saying, it's not because I stopped working on my sons. I felt like the Lord was saying, I did not just all of a sudden stop working and walking with my sons. I didn't just stop, doing my work within them, right? I am still working on them, and not only preparing them for life and the things I have called them into, but also preparing them for the marriages and the women they're supposed to marry. So he didn't just stop doing that. He didn't just drop the job and said, I'm not doing that anymore. But why is it that it seems to us or to many women that they are not there, right? And it's because we were blinded by a false voice in church culture. And I felt like he was saying, you guys need to step out. Like, you women need to step out of that mindset again. And you women need to realize that you have been blinded, like your perception has been screwed by this carnal mindset, by this carnal perspective. And you guys need to step out of it and ask in prayer for the Lord for you to see things through his perspective again. Because through this carnal mindset, things now shift. Like, the things that were in the forefront were the things that the world and carnal church culture deemed interesting and pursuable, and these are the things that are valuable. These are the people that are valuable, not things. But these are the people that are valuable. These are the men that are worth being pursued. These are the ones that should be pursued. The rest are not interesting. But it covered, that is why the men were standing behind this huge van and behind this huge posters, because they were being hidden behind the loudness of, the church and the carnal church and how they see things, secular world mindset, So he was like, look behind the curtains. I felt like this was encouragement, and this is an encouragement to certain women to look behind the curtain and to step out of that mindset and renew their minds so that they could see things from God's perspective. And the scripture that he gave me as a backup for that was 1 Corinthians 2, 12 to 15. And I need to even check, because the ESV version puts it really well. So 1 Corinthians 2 from verse 12 says, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand the things freely given us by God. And we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he's not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things. And that's verse 15, and I'm just reading that up until that point, but the verse continues. But basically, what he highlights to me was the reason why certain women are not seeing who are the men that are actually for them is because they're not viewing it from a spiritual perspective. It's like he was telling me, a carnal mindset will not help you recognize the person who has divinely been appointed for you. Like, it's disaligned. You have to align with God again to see the way he sees, to be able to see behind the curtains. Like with the lumberjack, if you, at first glance, you would push him aside and say, oh, he's a rough type of guy. He doesn't fit the criteria and the standard that I have and the expectations and the desires of my heart. But if you look closely, you started receiving this information about him, this wave of peace, this information and this confirmation that he was the answer to your individual and specific prayers. And you started noticing that, that the character traits in him were solid, that he was really humble, that he was a caregiver, that he was a lover, that he was a provider, that he is hardworking. And that masculinity, that these things were not even, the things that the world is trying to sell you are things that are surface level. They're not tangible. They're not rooted anywhere, But with him, the masculinity was tangible. It was somewhat rooted. It was not somewhat, but it was definitely rooted in him, and something that was a byproduct of who he was in character, created by God. And he was his leader. So there were so many good qualities that were revealed about him, but you had to come to that point. Like, I had to even reject or realize that I did not fit the three guys that were presented to me, to then even end up at that point and notice that what the world and the carnal world views as leftovers is literally the answer to your prayer. And I felt the Lord was saying, look behind the curtains, pray so that you can renew your mind. Pray for the Lord to help you renew your mind so that you can step outside of that toxic church culture, to realize that there is more behind the curtains. There is more that is being hidden behind the volume and the loudness of the world and the loudness of society and the expectations that they have. There is so much more that the Lord has for you there. And I just felt the Lord say, hey, I did not stop doing my good work. I am still doing my good work in my sons and men, but they are being overlooked. They are standing in the dark and they are waiting, because women have been sucked into, yes, they are victims somewhat to that, but also we are responsible. That's why he says, take the thoughts captive, right? The thoughts that come to us, the voices that we allow to speak into our minds and our hearts. Even within church, we have to be discerning about that. Even within church, we have to be able to guard our hearts to be sure when the Lord is speaking and when he is not. Because a voice may sound like God, but it may not be God's voice for you. So you have to discern to understand, this is what the Lord is saying to me right now. This is what the Lord wants me to engage in right now or not. Because as I said, this one guy who was presented, he was, he fit the standard of the world from the outside looking in, but he also had that good heart. And he eventually was paired up with one of the women through this game show. So the mercy of God and the will of God, even in his will, he will use situations like that to answer the prayers of the people who are truly walking with him. But that's not the case with everyone. So we still have to be discerning of what is going on here. Like, in its big, grand picture, we have to understand what is going on here. Is this harmful? Is this helpful? Is God's hand in it? Are the fruits of the Spirit being revealed or not? So that's one of the things I felt like he really highlighted to me strongly as a warning, and just as a calling back and say, be careful what you engage in, right? Is this my will for you or is it not? And then also it was a warning towards the people in church. Again, there are the people that look good and are good, and there are the people that are not. So the people that the world, deems valuable and pursuable and whatever, may not be the people who have had a work done in them, right? So this first guy was deceptive and manipulative. So his intentions were definitely not right. So there was definitely a misalignment between him and God in certain areas in his life. And the second guy did not have the love of Christ rooted in him. And these were things that he just brought me back again to one of my favorite verses, which is in 1 Corinthians 3:11, which says, there is no other foundation that can be laid other than the foundation which has been laid, which is Jesus Christ. And I felt like the Lord was saying, I want to bring you together into marriage after a foundation has been laid. Because if that foundation has not been laid, then your relationship cannot flourish. The foundation has to be laid in me. The foundation has to look a certain type of way. That is a work that I personally and intimately do in every single person. And if you pursue marriage or a person prematurely before that foundation being set, you might stumble and you might fall in times in your marriage because you have nothing to build on. I really believe he was telling me, it's like marriage is a time and is a relationship in which you are called to build. Not lay the foundation, but you're called to build on the foundation, and you're called to mature with each other. That is why when people, it's an opportunity, like he creates a foundation in which you can stand. He establishes you, right? In him, he builds this intimacy with you so that you can be dependent on God and not be dependent on the person and the spouse you're about to meet. But also he gives us the opportunity to grow in intimacy and loyalty and trust with each other, because to build means you may not have the shelter that you want. And when the storm hits, you might be there under, a tent or whatever, but in those storms and those times, you're building this loyalty and trust and this intimacy because you're going through the building process together, because you're going through the maturing process together. That is why it's the case that oftentimes a lot of people want to meet the perfect person, the perfect man or the perfect woman, and they're not perfect yet. But you can trust that if the Lord leads you to that person, that the foundation is laid, that the foundation is solid, the roots are there. they just need to flourish. The tree still needs to grow, but now you can be patient and walk with them in life. Because at the end of the day, a spouse is a life partner, not just, a handbag that you carry around with yourself and call it title of marriage and title of spouse and husband or wife. The title is not important. It's about what you have in that person and what you guys have together, right? So 1 Corinthians 3:11 was highlighted to me, and I felt like the Lord was saying, pay attention to the people whose work is not yet finished within them with me. Like, pay attention to people who are just potentials, not potentials as in they are not perfect, but potential as in you see clearly that the roots are not there yet. You see clearly that the foundation has not been set. And this is not something we can discern by ourselves. This is something we really need to go into prayer and ask the Lord to tell us, and to, we can fast or pray for him to tell us and reveal to us, are you done? Or is this for me or not? Or do I need to be a little more patient because you're still working some things out with him? Yeah. But I also found it really beautiful. Apart from the warning, this was also just very much an encouragement through the lumberjack saying, hey, the people that are hidden are the people who are prepared. Like, they are ready already. I rejected those 3 men, and then I went to look behind the curtains, and then I was led by this guy into his home. He was saying, this guy is ready, but he's waiting. He's being forgotten, and he's not being seen by the women in the church because they're looking in another direction. So this is not only a warning to say, hey, step back and be careful in what you're engaging in, but also, hey, I have the answer to your prayers. Things may not be as they seem. I have never stopped being God and never stopped working on my people, whether it is my sons or my daughters within the church. Like, I am still a God that answers prayers. So yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. I hope you guys got this. I think that's it. Or the most important things were said. This is encouragement in its grand scheme. This is an encouragement really to the church and the people in the church to continue to have hope, and also just be aware and guard your heart, and do not shun the people who haven't had the foundation laid completely, because at the end of the day, unbelievers are unbelievers because they don't know better, just as the people who are being pruned with God, who are in their wilderness season, ugliness will manifest, ugliness will be revealed. And that doesn't mean that they are wicked people or bad people. It just means that a work still has to be done within them. So be gracious towards those people, be loving towards those people, but also know where you stand towards them. You don't have to step into that type of relationship, but love them from a distance, right? So yeah, that's it, guys. Comment what may have spoken to you. I'm really interested to hear if this speaks to you. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.